Good morning, everybody. Or for those of you that are calling in from Australia, it's already evening time, so good evening to those of you that are calling in from Australia. It's really great to see you here all today. My name is Katarina Bouchard. I'm from the Scottish Communities Climate Action Network, or SCAN for short. And we have a very special session today, which is about how to engage citizens in climate action. And we're going to do a lesson shared across the continents between Scotland and Australia to the other end of the world. Now, many of us here are active in our local town or village or even in a community organization, as we all realize that climate change is not just another fad, hopefully like the coronavirus will be at the moment, but climate challenge indeed is the biggest challenge that we face. So since many of you probably know that we're currently using more than 2.5 planets in the natural resources that we use every day, and Earth Overshoot Day keeps moving forward every year. So that means that our global consumption of natural resources increases by the minute. Now, what does that mean? It means that basically we need to change our lifestyle in our Western societies. There is a lot to do, and indeed there are several studies that suggest that behavior change can contribute an immense amount to emission reductions. So there's, for example, in the Project Drawdown, which you might have heard of, the American Project Drawdown, they're actually in the top 3 solutions of how we can tackle climate change. Actually, behavior change are really in the top of the list. So things like eating less meat and cutting food waste are one of the top 2 things people can do in order to cut emissions. But then the question is like, how do we get people to do things? How do we get them to engage to push them to change lifestyles? So today we're in conversation with Mike McEvoy from the Australian charity Climate for Change. And also with Pam Candea from the Surefoot Effect, based here in Scotland, which is an organisation that equips people, groups and organisations across the UK and the rest of Europe with skills and sustainability and resilience. And so both of them have been active in climate conversations in one form or another. They're going to tell us about.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry. Can I just interrupt? Yeah. We have trouble to hear you. I wonder whether anyone else has trouble or whether it's our network.
Okay.
Yeah, we're having
oh dear, okay.
One of the things is if you don't move so much, if you keep your head still and don't move your hands around, it will put less pressure on the video. And that will make it easier.
Oh. Yeah. Okay, let's try that.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Sorry, I did not realize that. So I hope you can hear me now. Is that okay? Can I get some thumbs up from people with video? Okay, great. So as I mentioned, so we are in conversation today with Mike McEvoy from Australia, from Climate for Change, and Pam from Candea from the Surefoot Effect. And both of them have been engaged in climate conversations, which is a tool to get people on board, try to get people engaged with the whole topic of climate change and get them active. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear more about what your experiences with these conversations are, and indeed both they have different formats. It'd be really interesting to hear how that has panned out. So we're going to start just with a round of introductions for everyone, because I'd like to know who's on the call as well, and after that Mike and Pamela are going to present how they've been doing it in Scotland, other European countries and Australia respectively. And then after that we're going to have a dialogue between initially Pam and Mike, but you're very welcome to chip in and you know, make any comments that you wish to share as well. And also after that we will have a Q&A session which will enable us to oh, what's happening here? Let me go back to my screen. Sorry about that. So we will go back after that to doing some Q&As so that you have a chance to also ask any questions that you may have in this context, and also indeed share your experiences of similar experience of how you have engaged citizens that are not really the typical people that are already conscious and active in climate change, and how you've been engaging with them. So it'll be hopefully a nice round of lessons learned and sharing of experiences of how things are done here and across on the other side of the world. So first of all, big welcome to Pamela Candea and to Mike McEvoy. Thanks so much for joining us today. Just one practical thing before we start. We're going to record this session today. So if you're not happy with that, then I think the only thing I can invite you to do is either take off your screen or leave the session in order to preserve your anonymity. I hope that's okay for everyone. And now, before we start with the presentations, can I ask everyone to just introduce themselves? Just tell me who you are, your organization, if you have one, and also if you're calling in from Scotland, from Australia, wherever you are on this globe, that would be great. If Pam and Mike could start, that would be great, and then we'll just go around.
Hi, so I'm Pam Candea, and I'm in Stirling in Scotland today.
Thanks, Pam.
Hi everyone, it's Mike here from Melbourne in Australia from Climate for Change.
Do you want to pass to the next person, Mike, if you can see them?
Great idea. So the next person on my screen is Carolyn Ingvarson.
Hello. Oh, we're both. Okay, I'm above you and below you as well. Carolyn Ingvarson from Lighter Footprints in the east of Melbourne, the Climate Change Action Group.
Great, welcome.
Hi, my name's
Sally
Martin Brown. I'm
is
from,
also from
Transition Stirling in Scotland. I work for Pam.
Could you share, could you let us know who's the next person you would like to be introduced?
I think the order changes, but maybe Heather.
Hello, I'm Heather, and I'm a volunteer at the Shrub Zero Waste Hub in Edinburgh, Scotland. That's where I am at the moment.
Great, welcome. Who should be the next one, Heather?
Franz? Franz
Hi,
Ronning?
yes. We are in fact three here. Hello everyone.
Hi.
My partner Amanda over there, and my name is Franz.
And I'm Kat.
And that's Kat, and we are from XR Forest, and also in our other lives involved with consciousness rising for climate change.
In Scotland.
In Scotland, yes, we are in Forest, Finton in Scotland.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
There's another Caroline Ingvarson, it seems.
Hi, Sally Newell. I'm actually on Lighter Footprints Zoom, so hence that's in Carolyn's name. So I've just done a little bit of a blurb in the chat talking about how we used an academically based scorecard in Melbourne's conservative area, and I do comms with several groups, but particularly Lighter Footprints, and Lighter Footprints runs expert speakers monthly and has big forums, and we helped with other groups to do a pushback against the conservative swing by using a variety of tactics, particularly the scorecard.
Okay, great. Thank you. Who should be next, Carolyn? Can you nominate somebody, Carolyn, who should introduce themselves, please? Sorry, I didn't hear that because you got muted.
Can
at
you,
the
can
same
you
time.
do it? I can't see the other
All right.
people.
Okay, well, we have Claire Gibson here. Can't hear you particularly well, Claire. Could you try and go closer to the mic? Claire?
Yeah, can you hear me? Please?
Not very well at all. Just about guess.
Okay, that's the best I can get, I'm afraid.
Could you try and dial in again or go closer to the mic and we'll do your introduction later?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Lucy Ransom, tell us who you are.
Hello, I'm Lucy Ransom. I live just outside Glasgow in Scotland, and I'm currently developing my own project, Planet Friendly Living.
Great, thank you. Who should be next?
I suggest you call out Katerina.
Charlotte McCabe.
Hi everyone, I work for the Wilderness Society in Australia and I live in Newcastle, which is a couple of hours north of Sydney.
Nice, thanks for joining. Then we have David Somerville.
My name's David. I'm sitting in Edinburgh at the moment and I'm part of Transition Edinburgh and one of the board members of the Scottish Community Climate Action Network. Welcome everybody.
Thank you. Anna Markey.
I'm Anna Markey from Goole, South Australia, a small town an hour and a half south of Adelaide, where the River Murray reaches the ocean. And I'm both in Extinction Rebellion, South Australia, and in Climate for Change. So Mike is my mentor.
Great.
Just joined Climate for Change. Yeah.
All right, interesting. So you'll be able to join in the conversation and tell us how you're experiencing it on the ground later on. Excellent.
I've only done one.
That's all right.
But yeah.
Got to start somewhere. Anna Patfield, could you introduce yourself, please? Wait, we need to unmute you.
Just done that. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Can you hear me
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'm Anna Patfield. I live in Sutherland, in a town in Sutherland, up in the north of Scotland. I formed the group called Planet Sutherland, which is doing everything with everybody to try and reduce their carbon footprint. And well, we just started about July this year, and we're trying to engage with all individuals, all cross sections of society to just help everybody help the planet.
It's not a great sound on your end, thank you. I just about heard what you were saying. Don't know if you can improve the sound, or that would be great for the discussion later on. But we heard your introduction, kind of, I think. So thank you, Anna. Susanna Raffi.
Yeah, hi. I'm Susanna Raff. I'm from Australia, but I moved to the UK about 2 years ago. I actually started out with Climate for Change, helped Katerina and others set it up and develop up the gathering sort of format. But I did leave before Mike joined, so I'm sorry I haven't met you, Mike. Hi. But now here in the UK, based on my learnings from Climate for Change, I run workshops on how to have better conversations about climate change. Everyone seems to enjoy them. So.
Excellent. It'll be interesting to hear more about that later on as well. Thanks for introducing yourself, Susanna. Thanks for coming as well. Julian Atchison.
Yeah, hi. I started out with Climate for Change, so I know Mike fairly well, and I know Carolyn and Sally very well as well. I work with Lighter Footprints in Melbourne's East. Love promoting good climate conversations, and really interested to hear a Scottish perspective on this. Really interested.
Great. Thank you so much, Julian. Neve McNulty.
Yeah, I'm Neve. I'm from Scotland, and I work with Climate Camp Scotland, which is a new group. So yeah, just excited to hear what other people have to say, really.
Great, good stuff. Welcome. Miriam Atcock.
Hi, yes, I'm Miriam from Zero Waste Scotland, so based in Stirling, and my work is mostly with community groups and going out to speak to staff within businesses as well, trying to sort of cascade climate messages.
Great, thanks so much. Welcome, Miriam. Claire Gibson, shall we just try again and see if we can get you on better sound now? Just a quick introduction.
Yeah, hopefully that's better.
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
I think I had some technical difficulties. So anyway, my name's Claire. I'm from Keep Scotland Beautiful. We're based in Stirling. And my role is with communities, sort of supporting communities to deliver climate action projects and also delivering climate change training, really developing communities' climate literacy.
Great. Thanks so much for joining, Claire. Then we have Heather. You already introduced yourself earlier on, didn't you? Martin Brown.
Oh, hi. How are you doing?
Martin introduced himself before Katharina, right at the very
He
beginning.
did, no? Yeah.
Yeah.
Lauren Parry, then. Lauren, can you hear us? I'm not sure she can. Hopefully later on. Well, there's Lauren Parry. I'm not sure where she's dialing in from. We've got Nikki as well. Nikki, can you say hi? No, Nikki is not available either. We've got Louis Adamson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Lewis Adamson. I work for EST on the Energy Saving Trust, sorry, on the Home Energy Scotland programme. I manage the networks activity with community groups.
Great. Great, thanks for joining, Louis. Jan and Pete, where are you dialing in from?
We're dialing in from the Shetland Islands, where we run a wildlife sanctuary, and we're very interested in following any climate conversations that are happening in this country and encouraging stuff in Shetland.
Great, good stuff. Welcome. I've got Elle Cox.
Yep, hello, that's me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't go for a video link up because I'm in an office with lots of people sitting behind me. So I work in a corporate team in Scottish Borders Council, so we're way down in the very southeast of Scotland, looking to take a report to our council over the next few weeks in terms of a profile on climate change. Big part of that's going to be about public and partnership engagement, so I just was interested to find out what's going on in lots of other places.
Great, great to hear. Welcome.
Thank you.
Wendy, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Wendy Price. I'm based in Inverness. Used to be a very active member of Transition Black Isle, but now moved into Inverness and really keen to collaborate with other people and make changes here in Inverness. But wonderful to be able to be part of this worldwide conversation. Really intriguing. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Wendy. And then we have Jim Seamas.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you fine.
I'm dialing in from Lothian Road in Edinburgh on my way uptown. Anyway, nice to catch up with everybody. Some of you I know, some I don't. And I'm involved with Permaculture Scotland at the moment, and Edinburgh Sustainable Food City Partnership, and really interested in developing nature connection for schools and kids, and helping our next generations to be more ecologically minded and move on from the disaster we're in at the moment, that we're facing at the moment. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. I believe we are through with everybody. Did I miss anyone? And can you just say hi? I think I've got everyone here on the call now. Great, so welcome to everybody. So we're going to, I'm going to hand over now. Oh, there you go, Tim. I didn't see you. Earlier on. So I'm going to pass the floor to Pam, if you could start.
We've also recently worked on a European-funded project where we translated Carbon Conversations into Spanish and Lithuanian. It's been translated into French and now German in Switzerland as well. There's a very big group in the Netherlands, and I had a look at their website yesterday in preparation for this, and I've noticed they now do online carbon conversations. So I might just sign up myself and see how that works.
Pam, do you want me to share the images for that? I'm back now. Sorry about that. I dropped out.
Okay, yeah, if you can put the slides up, yeah, that will help. Yeah. And also, there was a question earlier about whether or not we could share everyone's contact details. I'm not sure about that, but I certainly would be willing to put together a list of links for all these things I'm talking about that would help people. So this is the book that goes with Carbon Conversations, and in this format, it's the book people can read to slowly take themselves through each part of the carbon footprint and the reasons it's difficult to change. If you can go ahead from there, Katharina.
Just 1 second.
Three of the 6 sessions have games with them, which are particularly engaging. So it's a way that people can look at the problem in somebody else's shoes. So the travel game, for instance, has a family that you work with as you go through different problems they might face. There's a house that you need to change to become more efficient. And food, everybody loves the food game. So, okay, go ahead, Katharina. We've also run groups. Well, yeah, these are some of the activities. So it's not just sitting around and talking. We actually let people get up and make posters and walk around, but talking all the while. Okay, thanks. We've also run carbon conversations with several corporate groups. Everything from, this is actually a group in DuPont in Denmark, the chemical company. And we've run it with local councils. We've run it with the co-op, as I said, with Scottish Parliament, a couple times with Scottish government, and with one of the water companies in England. And they find it very useful. We run personal change carbon conversations. And we find that corporate activities. This is one of the lessons in France. That's a reminiscent, I like positive impact method. Make that translation. Okay. And energy cities have carbon conversations, along with the other things that they're doing at a local government. And so they're actually in the engagement with people to then make it. A lot of these are all in. This is one of them. Okay, next one. Switzerland, Artisan de la Transition. And they take his part, and they have I wanted to also mention, one more, this is my Germans, and they also have this as Germans. Couple more things I just wanted to mention briefly is on the back of this, loads of people now run their meetings in a carbon conversations format. That's sitting in a circle without a table in the middle, because they realize the power structures of tables and the less power structured environment of sitting in a circle. We've also developed a climate justice workshop, which you can find on our website, which is free to download and use. And that has, even though it's a few years old now, a lot of people are interested in it now because it's another way to start the conversation with people. If you don't see climate change happening for you right where you are, maybe not so much in Australia now, but certainly in Scotland, that's an issue. You know, climate change, is it really happening? Then climate justice allows you to look at what's happening to other people and gets the conversation started. And finally, the other thing that we've been very involved in is the Scottish Government's climate conversations. And so when they put the tender out to create climate conversations, they referenced carbon conversations and asked for it to be done in that format. Climate conversations is a 1.5 hour quick dip in, a very initial discussion with people, getting them to connect with what they love, thinking about how climate change could impact that, and then looking ahead to some policy level actions that could be implemented to address climate change. And that's, yeah, as I say, that's a good introductory session for people as well. So I think that's all I wanted to say now. It was quite a bit of a blurt. There's more information on our website, or indeed just email me if you need to know more. And we have space for questions after. So I'll hand back to Katharina now.
Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you for sharing that. And so sorry I dropped out partially there. I hope that everyone else heard and saw you well, and thanks for explaining how all your past experience, even glimpses of your past experience, because obviously there's so much that's there to probably say. Can you hear me?
Yeah, maybe you'll need to turn your video off, Katharina, just to see if that's interfering. We can't hear you at all now.
How is that?
That's good.
Okay. So, gosh, I'm going to keep myself very quiet then and hand straight over to Mike, because it seems my bandwidth is not with me today. Mike, can you please tell us what's happening in Australia? Come on, tell us everything, please.
Sure, thanks, Katharina. And I suspect that the connection issue might be partly to do with the fact that you're recording the session tonight, so that your bandwidth might be under extra pressure at your end. Thank you, Pamela, for sharing with us the Carbon Conversations program. It's really interesting, and thanks for everyone for your introductions earlier. I just want to quickly acknowledge, not quickly, very importantly acknowledge that I'm coming to this conversation tonight from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation in Victoria in Australia, and I pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I acknowledge that Indigenous people here in Australia and right around the world have been at the forefront of climate injustice, and so it's really important to walk hand in hand, particularly in Australia, towards reconciliation, towards also climate justice with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I have a short presentation just about the work that we're doing at Climate for Change, but just briefly about me. Sorry, I thought someone was speaking. You can hear me okay? Yeah, so I came to Climate for Change around about 12 months ago, so I haven't been a part of the entire setup. Hi, Susanna, it's really nice to meet you across the globe after your important role in setting Climate for Change up those years ago. I was attracted to Climate for Change because the model is such a strong one, and I'd actually spent the last 2.5 years up until last year on a local council as an elected councillor, and had encountered firsthand that even in a kind of progressive part of town, that people in the decision-making roles were having some trouble actually making the decisions we need to make to reduce our emissions collectively with systemic change. And that is partly because there's a community that's not fully aware and understanding and not fully engaged in the issue. So when I saw the opportunity to come across to Climate for Change and work on this program towards the mission that Climate for Change has in Australia to create the social climate for effective action on climate change, then I jumped at it, and it has been incredibly rewarding to the last year. The last year too has been made up primarily of an evaluation and a review of the conversation program that's been running for four or 5 years. So looking at all that work and reviewing the impact and having a fresh look at things. So that's been my role over the past 12 months or so. I'm going to share my screen and share with you a little bit about us and what we do. So we are a small not-for-profit organisation. There's only 2 of us at the moment working on the Conversations program. I'm just assuming you can see a screenshot with lots and lots of people all holding up posters of Climate for Change. Is that right?
I can't see anything at the moment. I don't know if everyone else, I can just see that you have started screen sharing, but I can't actually see your screen.
Okay, sharing is paused. Bring your shared video to the front. Okay, it means I have to put my notes away, so that's dangerous for everyone. How's that?
That's better.
Great. Yeah, so we're a small not-for-profit organisation run almost entirely on an annual crowdfunder that we do, raising money. We don't get any government support or anything. And since January 2016, we've had about 8,500 attendees at our conversations, and on average about 8 or 9 people at each of those conversations, and they're one-off. They're not a series like the carbon conversations. They're just a single conversation. In that time, we've also trained over 300 people. I said just before, our mission is to create the social climate in Australia for effective action on climate change. And by effective action, we're talking about the kinds of changes that we need to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees this century, so in line with the IPCC report. And by social climate, we're talking about a climate of engaged citizens who are putting the right kind of level of pressure on our decision makers in government, but also in business, to take the measures that we need. We're responding to a problem that has turned up in Australian opinion polls for quite a long time now, which is that a good, healthy majority of Australians say that climate change is real and caused by humans. You might say that the 64% is not quite high enough, but it's still enough to see the changes that we need. But unfortunately, only 16% say it's an issue that determines their vote. That was according to an Essential Media poll of 2017. It's pretty consistent with most of the polls running over the last 10 years, and it is even still reasonably consistent after our most recent climate catastrophes of the bushfires and a terrible bushfire season here, that we've still got this gap between people's understanding of climate change as a real problem that's human caused and their understanding of what's required to meet that challenge. Many Australians will say that Australia is doing enough, and the UN wouldn't say that. So we base most of our work on social research. This is the diffusion of innovation diffusion curve, the normal curve that shows the way change happens through society. It's one of the models that we use as our theory of change, and it talks about the way any change moves through a social system or through society, from the advancement of women's rights to civil rights to even how a mobile phone, starts from just 1 or 2 people holding a mobile phone to everyone pretty much on the train when you get on it. So it talks about the way that change moves through society is through the connections that we have with people we know and trust, through conversations, through face-to-face conversations. We might receive information broadly through the media and we take it in through reading the news and so forth. But we'll process that information and we'll allow it to affect our behaviour once we've had a conversation with people around us. So our conversation model, and like most conversation models, is based on that fact. Ours invites a host to invite their friends and family to have a conversation about climate change with them in their living room. And over the course of 2.5 hours, we allow them to this time and space to really nut it out together and decide how they will respond. There's more I could say about the social tipping point that happens once our trend-setting early adopters start talking to the early majority and so forth. That's certainly a tipping point we're pretty keenly running towards before the natural tipping points of our climate change. So, yeah, I said just before, a host invites 8 to 12 friends into their home, and we send a trained facilitator to lead a 2.5 hour conversation. We share a video which covers all the kind of main facts about climate change. It also covers some of the solutions that exist, but it does leave our audience reasonably stunned and in a little moment of fear and panic and anxiety. It raises all of those things, and then we have the time and space afterwards to really talk through then what action we can take. Our theory of change also acknowledges in a sense that we might all take individual actions in our homes, and I might ride my bike rather than drive my car to work. But even if we were doing that at a reasonable scale with the people that are currently concerned about climate change, we wouldn't have the change that we need in the time that we need to keep global emissions to a safe level, which is 0. So what we do need is more people stepping up and standing up and speaking out to our decision makers. So that's directly engaging with MPs, and also reaching out and encouraging others to take those kinds of actions as well. So we say, stand up and reach out, or at least generally speaking, our conversation attendees will come to those conclusions themselves through the course of the conversation. And then at the end of our conversation, we provide opportunities for action, and they include coming back to the conversation program itself. So we'll invite someone at other people at the conversation to host their own with their network, and we'll invite people to train as a facilitator themselves. We'll invite people to take some further steps to join an MP engagement group, and so on. We have classified our Australians into 6 potential audiences. It's influenced by the 6 Americas study, also some work from researchers here in Australia, and having a close look at a whole range. I'm getting some pretty bad feedback at the moment, so I might. That's worked. A whole range of opinion polls as well, which talks about these groups. So generally speaking, up the left-hand side of this are the leaders who are taking lots of self-driven action on a regular basis, both as a citizen in civically engaging with the issue of climate change, and as an individual in their choices and divesting and all kinds of things. People in the next 3 categories are our target audience. So that's those that are occasionally taking action, and often they need a bit of a prompt to take action. So that's active. Passive, who are strong supporters of strong climate action, but they might not do anything other than vote. And wavering, who say they support strong action from our leaders, but will often waver when faced with real life examples. And that's where some of the gap that I was talking about in our opinion polls really come to bear witness, that we will end up with leaders who don't have the policies we need, even though the majority of Australians realise that we need to do something about climate change. And then the other 2 groups are not in our target audience: cautious and opposing. Either they don't know, they don't care, or they're sceptical, or they're just outright deniers, and we know that we don't need to directly engage with them to see the social change that we need. So the review that I've been doing, or we've been doing over the last 12 months, has found that we have been consistently reaching our target audience. So 90% of the people in our conversations are from those three groups of active, passive, and wavering. 33% are wavering, which is a pretty healthy chunk of people who are not quite sure even what policies we might need. 37% passive and 20% active. And almost 60% of our audience aren't already engaged in the climate movement. You might talk about it, so they're not already receiving emails or on the lists of other environment organisations. So that's a good sign that we're reaching new people, and I think it's partly because of our model that reaches out through social networks to reach people that may not be being engaged by other means. We're classifying our audience according to, first of all, what they say. So just to really quickly, this is a bit of a backtrack, but people who are dismissive and wavering either don't know what to think. People who are wavering say that we need to, they can't support policies that will significantly impact people's jobs, electricity costs, or the economy. And then that dotted line shows the gap then between people who are passive, active, and leaders, and they are really concerned about climate change. They think we should do everything we can to stop it. Whatever the economic impacts of the action needed, not taking action will be far worse. The way we separate those people that are passive, active, and leaders is in response to the way they answer questions about the action they take, and specifically the civic or political action that they take. So passive people are very occasionally or never taking action. Active people are at least occasionally, and leaders are engaging regularly. And through the course of a 2.5 hour conversation, it's pretty ambitious to say that we would change things, but it seems that things are changing. So when we catch up with people 3 months later, we have around half the number of people wavering, and we've doubled the number of active and leaders. So that's a pretty big look at the kind of broad population. And then when you narrow that down to the individuals and their individual transitions from one category to another, we're also looking pretty healthy, actually. So almost half the people have changed categories, and changing categories isn't the be all and end all, because you can still change behaviors, but we're seeing some pretty good shifts. For example, there's a square there that will show that before the conversation, there's a blue square towards the middle. That's 14.4% of people were passive before the conversation and active after. And the square next to that is 3.1% of people that were passive before and a leader afterwards. There's heaps of stories of people that have gone from one category to another as well. So we're getting lots of qualitative feedback as well. Kate is one of our core volunteers at Climate for Change, but she started out wavering. She was someone that would have balked at certain policies when they were put forward. She knew that climate change was a problem, but she didn't think we really needed to address it at that sort of speed. And she came to a conversation, and she says it changed her life. She resolved from then on, I would do whatever I could, both personally and professionally, to address climate change. And indeed she has. She's one of our core volunteers, and spends at least a day a week working on our social media and other things at Climate for Change, and managing other volunteers. One of many, many stories like that. Some more stats just for the fun, for those that like these things. I've been getting pretty attached to them. So 77% of people said the conversation influenced a change in at least one behaviour. And these are the sorts of behaviours that we're shifting. So we've got 46% attendees contacting their politician more frequently after a conversation, 54% getting more engaged in helping and supporting climate organisations through their donations and their volunteer efforts. There's still a shift in people's individual behaviours, like driving less and eating less. Almost half of people change those. And we're also seeing people moving their money or their services either through their choices in energy provider or who they bank their money with or have their superannuation and other investments with. Indirectly, we're also influencing all the conversations that happen after one of our formal conversations, and certainly a big majority of people say they have more conversations after attending one of ours, and that these conversations, our conversations, helped sort of inspire that and equip people with a bit more information and knowledge so that they felt comfortable doing that, which really does feed into our theory of change and the way social change happens through conversation. These are some of the statistics about how people are shifting immediately after a conversation. So the survey that we do in the minutes after someone comes out, 99% of people are saying they learned something new. 85% are saying they're feeling more confident answering questions about climate change. There's an increase in concern of 68%. And when you consider how many people already came in pretty concerned, that's a good effort. And 86% of people are leaving more empowered to take action on climate change with an understanding of what actions they can take. Another little story for you as well. Rosie was one of the attendees at a conversation, and she said that the conversation gave her a better sense of the actions that she can take as a citizen outside of voting at elections, and she found that empowering. And she's also found that she now talks about climate change and what we can do about it so frequently that it's a normal topic of conversation among my friends, which is good because it can be a frightening and somewhat taboo topic. Indeed, another one of our facilitators has facilitated a number of conversations in a major carbon emitting organisation, and where within that organisation it was very taboo to talk about climate change at work in any way. But she, through her courage and using our model, was able to change that situation to the point where the senior members of the executive are now having conversations with ministers when they go into those meetings. So the change that obviously that happens through conversations, through the opportunity to have a 2.5-hour dialogue in a trusted family and friends setting, sees a lot of change in that short term. The other key part of our model, which I wanted to share with you, is the one that we've we've taken from network marketing and the Tupperware party model. So at each one of our conversations, we're aiming to get another 2 conversations booked from the people that are present at that conversation. So theoretically, you could grow a tree that looks like this, where one conversation could reach 600 people through a number of conversations that are run over a couple of months. Now, I can tell you from the review process that it's not working quite like this, but certainly it is starting chains of conversations, and we are getting deeper into communities using this model. And the 2 things that we train our facilitators in more than anything, in fact, is how to book a conversation from a conversation, which is what you would get trained at if you went and signed up to be a facilitator or what are they called? A sales consultant at Tupperware. And the other one is about sharing your own personal narrative with the knowledge that builds a lot of trust, and it is probably one of the most persuasive parts of the conversation is that here before me is a volunteer who's giving up their time on this issue because this is the best way that they feel we can make a difference to get the word out and make sense of what is a crazy thing to be aware of the climate emergency when you walk out into your day-to-day life and it feels like no one else is. So sharing a personal story about your experience is an important part of it too. There's obviously a lot more support and training we give to our facilitators, but these are 2 of the key skills that we share up front. And on that front, we're very keen to measure how many people from our conversations sign up to host or facilitate. And this slide shows that 36% of people at our conversations are signing up to host the next one, which is a pretty good number. That is close to the 1 or 2 per conversation that we're looking for. And 21% are signing up to facilitate. That tree that I showed you before doesn't work unless we're also recruiting and training and signing up facilitators along the way as well. Otherwise you get a very burnt out facilitator at the end of that tree. This is a graph that shows that things have been growing reasonably consistently over time. So since the beginning of 2016, we've been seeing a good growth at Climate for Change, but there's certainly a long way to go for us to get to the kind of exponential growth that is theoretically built into our model, and something that we're working on soon. I just want to also share with you, one of our facilitators trained in Queensland. We're mostly based in Melbourne and Brisbane, but Jody trained in Queensland, and then her circumstance meant that she moved to Darwin, and she decided to take the conversation model with her. She had a goal to facilitate 1 conversation a week, and she's been doing it pretty consistently for the last 6 or 7 months. So in her first 7 months, she reached 235 people through 23 conversations. And she's also now started recruiting and mentoring another facilitator in Darwin to keep that going. It's pretty amazing and inspiring to see where people, when they take our model and the conversation sort of resources that we provide, where they can take it. And Jody is just one of many that have done some pretty amazing things. So as a final thing, just to let you know what we're doing next, we're completing this impact report and program review, and we're feeding this into a strategy. Some parts of our emerging strategy are going to be about the way we can simplify some of the systems of our program so that it can grow even faster and be picked up by more people without intensive support, and to see how we can share through conversations like this one tonight, and allow others to borrow what they like from our program to replicate it within the climate movement. And to do that too, we're also partnering and with others to create the modules that we can share, but also to continue running the program in different settings. I wasn't keeping time. I was speaking as fast as I could, but I hope that I kept it okay, and I'm really looking forward to the dialogue that's next.
Formats. I'm really intrigued by what you've talked about, Mike, and we need to have a conversation later. Because I think that what you're doing, like the Scottish Government's climate conversations, is a good way to get people who aren't already engaged in doing something started on their journey. Carbon conversations always has been more for people who actively want to do something about their carbon footprint. So can somebody mute somebody's talking. You could mute yourself for a minute, please. Thanks. Yeah, so these conversations are for different stages in people's journeys. And I think, we need all of this. We need the introductory one to get people active. And then we also need to get the further work done. And doing that work in a group is always easier for people, is my observation. So yeah, enough for me.
Great, thank
you. That's really interesting, Pamela. And as much as possible, I think it'd be great to have part of that conversation here, because one of the things that we're looking at is how we can provide opportunities for people to have a bit more of an ongoing conversation. A large part of that is about civic engagement, because we've found that it's one of our volunteers has started an MP engagement group program, partly in response to the fact that it's much easier to motivate yourself to write letters to elected officials with others and a glass of wine than it is on your own on a Sunday night. So we're really interested in helping develop the what's next from our conversations, rather than sending people off into the world. And if they don't want to host or facilitate one of our conversations, the question remains, well, who are they connected with and what are they doing? So part of that is partnering with other organisations so they have a pathway. But I'm really keen to find out whether carbon conversations and that very structured way that you lead people through a bunch of different actions they can take to transform their own response to climate change, whether that could be another model that we could feed people into, because it seems like there's a need for both, like you say.
Great. What I was wondering, Mike, does the Australian format with these home conversations focus on any specific themes that you work on, or how do you, what's the conversation about essentially when you have people sitting in your living room and talking about climate change? And yes.
Katharina, you were breaking up again, but if I try and paraphrase, you were saying, is there a specific theme that our conversations follow after, or at least after the video part of our conversation? Am I right? Is that the question around, is there a specific theme? In fact, now you've frozen. So I might answer that question and we'll see. The main theme is a question of what do we do as individuals when we're faced with this problem and we're living in a world where the systems are not geared to support our individual actions as we might wish. So how do we best use our energy and our time and our passion and our enthusiasm to affect the greatest change? And so that's the question that we put out to our groups. And generally speaking, with a bit of a nudge from our facilitators, people come to the conclusion that some of the strongest things that we can do are to engage the people around us in a conversation about climate change and speak up collectively to people who are making decisions around the systemic changes that we need, or in the case in our government, unfortunately blocking the changes that we need. So it's a pretty political conversation in its nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Mike, for that. I was just wondering also, if we can talk about, Pam, do you want to say something, because I see you putting in the chat?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that, Katharina.
I was just wondering, because you put something in the chat, did you want to say it directly?
It was just an answer to someone else asking about whether or not carbon conversations will allow people to look at climate grief. And yes, carbon conversations, the whole method is based on Warden's tasks of grief model of the emotional journey people go through. And increasingly, I find groups do want to use that space to express grief and anxiety. And I've said, however, I think Joanna Macy's work that reconnects is very, very helpful for grief, and is maybe an offshoot that people need to move to work through some grief before coming back to action. So not a direct answer there to that question.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, actually, because I was wondering about the, people who are sort of overwhelmed with the whole climate change. There's a lot of people that feel like, oh my God, it's such a big issue. What are we going to do about it? And they sort of become paralyzed by it because they feel, oh my God, it's too big for me, I can't handle it. So do these conversations help with addressing that kind of stuff? And is that something that
Okay, you've broken up a little bit again there at the end. I wonder if it's when you move your hands. I don't know. So do these conversations, and then I lost it.
Do these conversations help with addressing basically climate overwhelm and paralysis? Is that a major topic in the conversations?
Yes, very much so. The structure of carbon conversations, and it might be similar for yours, Mike, I don't know, is that we start with the big problem. And we look at your emotional connection to that area. And then we move into the possibility of action. What are the possible actions? And then it comes down kind of like in a funnel by the end of the session. As with many workshops, you go away with some idea of either an action you can commit to or one that you can contemplate committing to. Yeah, so by moving us from the pain in our hearts back up into our heads temporarily with action, that gives your heart a little space to rest. However, we can't continue to do that because I think that is what has caused this problem. We spent too much time in our heads and we're not allowing the emotional impact of what's happening to guide our future actions. I find it very telling that certainly on our news here in the UK, the coronavirus has gone from worrying about people dying to the stock market. We're now just totally worried about the stock market. You know, what is that about? So yeah, I don't want to start that whole discussion, but I do think that's similar to what we do about climate change. It hurts too much, so we move up into our heads. That's useful to give ourselves a break and to take valuable action that might help solve the problem. Okay.
I don't know what it says about Australia, but we went from talking about people dying to stockpiling toilet paper. So we went a different way or something in Australia. Very strange.
No. Oh no, people are doing that here too.
Oh, it's not just us. What a relief. This is what these international conversations are for.
So in Mike, do climate conversations, to come back to that topic, do they are they in Australia, the home conversations, are they also talking about emotions, or is it quite political? So that doesn't sound like it's very emotional. Do people also talk about how scared they are?
Oh yeah, the emotional quality of the conversation is a really, really important one. From the moment the facilitator shares some vulnerability at the start, to the way that we allow that to exist after people have contemplated the problem. So in actual fact, Pam, you just described that start with the problem, you know, that I guess that funnel, and I think that happens in our conversations as well. We go through that emotion and that overwhelm, and it's really important that we don't leave people there. So we do provide some opportunities for even people to sign up and take some action immediately after our conversation, although recognizing that everyone needs to choose their own kind of action as well, and that not always the ones that we've got on offer for people will be the right ones for them. I mean, I know working in this space that I go between the overwhelm and passionate action, you know, on a pretty regular basis. So I think any organisation that's working in climate change is going to be dealing with climate grief and anxiety and overwhelm, with staff and volunteers and the people that we're in contact with. And it's something that we desperately all need to find resilience in and camaraderie with, I think, and ways to talk about. Yeah, it's not uncommon for colleagues of mine to be, and myself included, to be crying at work inexplicably, and when we think that we're dealing with it all fine. So I think it is such an important thing that we are building community and connection with others at this point in time.
Okay. Sounds definitely like an important thing to do in a world which is becoming more and more isolated for various reasons. So that sounds like an interesting one. It was a comment that we should have more online conversations now and then. That'll be a question I would have. Was better, and which one would you prefer to attend? If you could just say
we can't hear you. Can you put it in the chat?
Okay, I'll try that again now.
You have to do it very short and have a break. So basically, after about 2 sentences, you go garbled.
All right, okay. I'll try and not talk too much then. So I've got a little poll. If you could just fill that in. It's about which climate format, conversation format would you prefer? The home conversation model, the workshop model, or an online course. So if you could just put your votes down for that.
Heather, and Mike can correct me, I think the difference between the home conversation and the conversation workshop is that the home conversation is a one-off, and then the carbon conversations are 6 2-hour workshop sessions. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, it sounds like that's one of the primary differences that we've been able to uncover in this conversation so far. I'm sure there'll be even more nuances, but
yeah. And I see Franz has asked if it's possible to do online training for your facilitation, Mike, which I would also be interested in.
yeah, we've over the years we've tried lots of different things with training, and we have got a 3-hour training that we can do through Zoom online. But one of the best ways of learning is through doing. So we couple that with a mentor program where you get to be mentored by an existing facilitator. So yeah, absolutely. I think over the coming months, as we gear up into action a bit more, there's that possibility for you to join us. Can I ask, Pam, the attendees at the conversations, the carbon conversations, how do they come together? How do they come to be there? Who are they? Do they already have a connection? Do they know each other?
I think the most successful ones have been where people already have some kind of connection together. We do occasionally run just open ones where all our facilitators are volunteers, and they could just advertise somewhere, say this is happening, and then move on from there really to organizing where it could happen. And indeed, quite often they do happen in people's homes. I think it's just, I think it's really interesting because I think you are probably attracting people to yours who wouldn't be initially attracted to signing up for 6 2-hour sessions. However, having gone on yours, they might. And we go deeper into actually, moving into action. So yeah, I'm quite excited about potential synergy there.
Yeah, I suspect you're right. Like a good proportion of the people that come to our conversations wouldn't have any sense that they are going to need to go away and do anything after coming to our conversations. They've been lured in with a cup of tea and a piece of cake from a friend and a conversation about climate change. But if you'd said sign up to this 6 2-hour workshop series, then most of them would run away screaming, I think.
Yeah.
And then many of them surprise themselves by signing up to become a facilitator and facilitating, scores of these across the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Are there any other questions out there? We have a couple minutes, I see.
Is it possible to actually do some kind of cross-fertilization? I think it would be wonderful. And I'd be very, very keen on the GriefWorks links. It is pretty damn hard. There's also one of the speakers in the link I've just put up is the mother of one of the original school strikers. She is remarkably funny and fantastic. So Psychology for a Safe Climate in Melbourne is a fantastic resource, and I think you guys would really learn from each other, and I'd be pretty keen on those GriefWorks links. It's difficult to move past your anger at the political situation, and it's the good old 4 a.m. wake-ups that happen every now and then. So yeah.
I've put the Work That Reconnects link in the chat, but there must be some way we can get some information out to everybody who's signed up for this. I'm not quite sure how. Well, it was on Eventbrite, wasn't it? So we should be able to send some information. I've put my email in the chat. Please contact me if anybody wants to, about what we can do here in Scotland or in the UK.
Yes, I will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone that's been on the call today, also with some additional resources, taking what's been posted on the chat as well. So hopefully you will all get that. We've got just like a couple more minutes, so we can take maybe 1 or 2 more questions from people here on the call. Does anybody would like to say anything?
I see one from Heather in the chat saying, aside from the official climate conversations, how can we effectively have an informal conversation with family and friends, with 1 or 2 or 3 people? I often chat about making changes, but I'm unsure if that's creating the sort of conversation which is actually having an impact, which is a great question.
Yeah.
Our CEO, Katerina Gator, and founder, who did the beautiful gymnastics of joining the Tupperware party model together with kitchen table conversations and developed what we do at Climate for Change. She runs workshops and has also developed a workshop around having conversations, effective conversations with people. There are lots of resources around as well, and I think she's referred to a lot of those in developing that workshop. But a couple of tips that I would say is speak from the personal and stay away from the facts. Just talk about your own level of feeling on the matter, and those changes that you are making in your life are absolutely worth talking about, and the reasons why are the fodder that will have an impact. The other thing is there's no reason why with 1, 2 or 3 people in an informal way you couldn't carve out a little bit more time. And one way might be to watch a documentary or a film together and then talk about it afterwards, so that you sort of create that atmosphere with the topic. And that'd be 2 tips that I'd have. And I wonder whether anyone else on the line, or Pam, whether you have any tips.
I would just agree that certainly sharing a short film is a great way to get a conversation started. Also, I know a number of people who run book groups for people who like that format. So you read a chapter of, you know, one of the many books on climate change and have a group discussion about it. It makes it a more relaxed format that way, I think.
That's a great idea. Any other ideas out there? How have you engaged with people? How have you engaged with friends, with family, or even with strangers?
If I can add in actually, because just as I'm thinking here, so I'm currently in Adelaide, and me and a few friends started a waste reduction group probably in July of last year. And something that we're going to try this year, which now hearing about these conversations might be quite a good fit, is similar also to the Tupperware model. We're inviting kind of friends of ours from the local community to come around and just talk about ways that people are trying to reduce household waste. So from, you know, what kinds of shampoos they use and household products. And between us, we're actually have got 70 people on the list. And the idea was that from those 70 people, if anybody wanted to then kind of host similar conversations in their houses, then that would be good. And obviously, as I'm listening to this, it's such a similar model, but we're just approaching it from, you know, mums in the local community, kind of thinking about what we do in our own houses, but to then utilize that opportunity and to actually have broader climate conversations might be something that, yeah, we would love to consider. That could be a really good kind of match.
Thank you. That's a really good idea, and something to talk about, something more specific as well. So that's great that you're doing that. I don't know if you want to continue the conversation after the call, Nicola, with Pam or with Mike to talk in a bit more detail about how they can perhaps support you as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. All right. Any last hints on how to reach out to people from participants? This is your chance, your golden opportunity.
I see Carolyn's hand.
One of the strong things from psychologists in Melbourne working with kids is that you have to actually produce action pathways, and that this was remarkable in terms of actually stopping paralysis and helping kids getting over depression. And that might mean learning a whole pile of political skills. One of the worries for me in this conversation is the lack of political action. So our recent meeting with Simon Holmes à Court, he talks about political action is like brushing your teeth and putting your clothes on, and after that we then need to the personal action, the political action that's required so that people who don't care have low carbon food, drive EVs, have public transport, and have clean energy. That's the work that will actually stop us from having human extinction. Now, I wanted to use those words. Climate emergency is a good framing. It has been successful, and people now in Extinction Rebellion now has at least close to 2/3 of as many people as the Labor Party in Melbourne, in Victoria and probably in Australia. So I don't know what you guys think about that. I know it's outside the scope of this call, but when you think about people who are doing very deep personal work, maybe part of the transformation that occurs in their lives, say for us, we sold our business and work for no money as climate activists, part of that might be to consider direct action.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that, Carolyn. Indeed, you know, Extinction Rebellion and other groups are very active and in getting people engaged, and so that shouldn't be underestimated as a means of also reaching out to people. So thanks for sharing that. Unfortunately, our time is already up, and I'm really pleased that we managed to, despite technical difficulties on my side, and sorry for dropping out a couple of times of the call, but hopefully you all managed to stay on and listen to what Pam and Mike had to say to you and to share. Thank you so much to Pam and Mike for sharing your experiences from here over in Scotland and over in Australia, about how you get people engaged in talking about climate change, and not just talking about it, but actually taking the next step, taking action as either facilitators of different climate conversations, or indeed taking sort of day-to-day changes of habits, as such as whatever, taking your bike to work, or walking instead of taking your car. So it just shows that these conversations are indeed an effective tool, and so I'm really pleased to hear that we've been able to hear that. And that indeed is quite encouraging that, you know, indeed the home conversation model from our little poll we had was very popular as well. 2/3 of people here thought that this was the kind of format they would like to be in, which just shows that people want to be sort of picked up of where they are, you know, literally, you know, in their own living room. So thank you so much for you know, bringing that, you know, showing that example as well of like how we indeed deliver something is important, because it's not just about that we talk about it, it's about how we talk to them about it. What Pam was saying about how we should also you know, not forget the emotional level of, you know, letting people feel where they are. And so these are all considerations we need to make when we have these conversations. So thank you so much again for sharing that. Thanks to everyone from Australia and from Scotland for taking part in this Tuesdays for Climate special session. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again on the next call, and we'll be sharing some resources that everyone has been sharing here in the chat through an email, follow-up email. And if you then want to get in touch with the two speakers, or indeed anyone else on the call, then you're very welcome to do that. So thanks again, and have a very good day or evening, depending on what part of the world you're on. And see you next time. Thanks a lot to everyone. Bye-bye.